together because I do want to let you know about two things that are happening in the life of our women's ministry. Number one is we have our very last gathering women's dinner next Tuesday night, and we have 10 spots left. The childcare is full, but we have 10 spots left. If you want to come, we will be wrapping up celebrating the season of fall with the time of teaching and worship, and then we're going to eat a yummy meal together. And so $7, you can register at events.crossgates.org. And then something I'm super excited about, our Women's Holiday Brunch is the first Saturday of November. It is November 5th. And the charcuterie chick from Meridian is coming to teach a charcuterie class. If you don't know what that is, it's like an adult Lunchable on a tray, except it's really pretty. And so just in time for all of your holiday hosting, and you're like, I don't host. It's okay. You can make one for yourself and eat it. And so you will, it's $25, and the cost includes a full plate of hot brunch. The class is like a 30-minute demonstration thing, and then you're going to actually get a hands-on chance to do it and then take home the board you made. So it'll be super fun. If you have a friend that you're like, I don't know what to buy them, they have everything, buy them this. And say, hey, come spend the morning with me at my church. Also, if you have a coworker that you would love to get in the building and around our people and they would not come to a Bible study or a women's dinner, this is another great way to get them in the building and with our people. So anyway, the tickets are available right now. There's no childcare because it's on a Saturday, and I can't do it on a Saturday. So events.crossgates.org, you can get a ticket, and they will go pretty quickly. So if you want to go, I want you to be able to. So jump on there in the next couple of days and join us. It'll be fun. And that will be our last event for this year. So, okay. Here we go. We're ready? All right. Doubt. I just sense down here, Joy is doubtful that I'm going to make it. Now I'm determined. Just game on. Okay. All right. So we talked about last week, we went slow and steady. And one of the reasons why I did not want to group that together is because I felt like it was just such a tender thing, right? It felt like we really needed to spend some time pulling it apart, seeing what was there, making sure we laid down some misconceptions and picked up some understanding. And we made our way through that section about laws about slaves. And so if you missed that, you can go back and listen to it on the website or on our Facebook page and kind of catch up that beginning, because we are in the book of the covenant. And so we've come out of the 10 Commandments, and now we're just going to spend some time unpacking these in a little bit more depth. And so we did that last week with the laws about slaves. And here's where we kind of ended and where I want to kind of pick up as a runway. As we wrestle with some of this and we think, okay, I maybe feel a little bit better after hearing the teaching last week, and I still feel like maybe God should have just said, we're not doing that anymore, and we're not doing that anymore, and we're not doing that anymore. And I totally understand that sentiment. Believe me, I totally do. That God should have just overturned the whole thing. But we have to be careful to understand as we read these laws, this is how God is saying that the people of Yahweh will be in a world that is far more crooked and depraved in their ideas and laws, okay? And so in the same way that the Lord doesn't say, okay, well, now you're a believer, well, you're coming to me. I'm not leaving you here in the brokenness, right? That the tension of the broken, fallen world we live in and the tension of what will be for us as believers that is not yet, that is the tension that we live in, right? And scripture speaks to us being lights, right? A city on a hill in a crooked and perverse generation. And so what he's doing is he's setting apart the people of God who are living in a broken world. And in our longing for God to overturn broken systems, we can see our own longing for heaven and a new earth, one without brokenness and without the need for the law at all, because we won't even be tempted to sin. And to that we say, come, Lord Jesus, right? Just can't even imagine what that would be like. And so just like Jesus in the New Testament stepped into broken systems and showed a better way while ultimately pointing him towards himself as the way, So God is showing us here, this is not his ideal, but it is allowing the consequences of sin and brokenness to be present while providing a way to glorify the Lord in the way in which we operate. Okay, so that's kind of the framework that we're going through as we work through these laws together. So the verses of Exodus 21, verses 12 through 32, all have to do with laws relating to where someone was injured by another person or by an animal, okay? And again, this is the part where we realize, oh, I know why I never read past the 10 Commandments, because this all seems very specific. I have no oxen. This feels very odd, and that's okay. The Lord can handle that from you. But we're going to just kind of pull some different parts apart and see what we find. So I'm going to read a little bit, and then I'll start chunking it together. So Exodus 21, beginning in verse 12. Whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint for you a place to which he may flee. But if a man willfully attacks another to kill him by cunning, and you shall take him from my altar that he may die. Whoever strikes his father or his mother shall be put to death. Whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him shall be put to death. Whoever curses his father or his mother shall be put to death. Thrilling, isn't it? Comfy. Okay, 18, when men quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and the man does not die, this one's funny to me, but takes to his bed. He's got to go lay down, okay? Then if the man rises again and walks outdoors with his staff, he who struck him shall be clear, only just pay him for the loss of his time, and shall have him be thoroughly healed. Okay, so it's okay. I mean, I'm sure they would be like, why are you laughing at our laws? But that's funny to me. Like, if you hit him, but he's not dead, he just needs to go lay down. Just pay him for his day's work that he missed, and he'll get back out there, right? Okay, so, but what I want you to hear is a couple things. One, there's lots of putting to death, okay? And so what do we see? We see that God is serious. Right? That yeah, we can laugh and that's fine. That wasn't like a trick you shouldn't have laughed about the man in his bed, right? No, that's funny to us because it's just, whoa, like what in the world? It's context. But it does show us that God is serious about these things that he's saying, right? And another thing I want you to notice as you read down through there, you'll see the mention in verse 15 and in verse 20, father and mother, male and female, okay? Why is that important? Because there is an acknowledgement and a protection for both. And this distinguishes the people of Yahweh because this is not something you would have seen in other systems of law, right? It would only make provision for the males. And so for God to include women in this shows, hey, the people of Yahweh, they're going to be marked differently in the way that they treat each other, not just person to person, but between genders. And then in verse 22 through 25, when men strive together and hit a pregnant woman so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay the judges, pay what the judges determine. But if there is harm, then you shall pay for the life. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. Verse 25 and 24 and 25 should sound a little bit familiar to you. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? And I'm not talking about your Mississippi granddad. I'm talking about Jesus talks about that, right? And we'll talk about that in a second. So a couple things here as we're kind of working our way through bird's eye view because we're grouping it together. One thing I want you to see here is it does seem like an odd law about the pregnant woman and who strikes her. And I'm sure there's a lot there contextually that we could dive into. But here's what I don't want you to miss. God cares about the unborn. God is making provision for the unborn. This is something that he is putting out there in the forefront. He's making it its own law, right? Its own section. He's protecting both her and the unborn child. And so as we read that, even if we don't understand, and this is just a good Bible study habit, even if we don't understand if they're lying in wait for her, or if they all gang up on her, what all does that mean? There's probably a lot there we could unpack. But at first brush, what could we take away? That God cares for the unborn and is making provision in the law for them. We also see the desire for the punishment to fit the crime, okay? So in corrupt systems, where judges were able to just execute justice however they wanted, he is saying, no, this is going to fit, right? Because here's what we know. I'm going to take you just down a little path here. Jesus teaches on this later in Matthew 5, verse 38, when he says, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil, but if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Okay, we've heard that maybe in the New Testament. So at the heart of what Jesus is saying in Matthew is that people have taken the law provided to the judges, right, which we're reading right now in Exodus, and they have put themselves in the seat of judge. So in any given situation, they are then deciding how that should go. Okay, everybody with me? If you're not, I think I'll find you right here. Okay, so here we see it being outlined for the protection and order of the people of God. Not because of the sweetness of retaliation, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but because when something has happened to us, when we have been wronged, we don't really want justice, do we? We want revenge. We want it to hurt them more than it hurt us. So the provision that God is making in this law is that the punishment fits the crime. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. Why? Because you don't want to hurt someone in return more than, right? You want justice, not revenge. Does that make sense? So for our hearts, which are prone to that, God is making provision. We don't want to hurt someone more than we did. This law protects them to see that justice is served and not someone's revenge. And then Jesus will later speak to that about how people have used that as an excuse to not engage with people in a way that is God honoring. And so he says, if they eye for eye, tooth for tooth, but I tell you, right, turn the other cheek. And so he refers to this section of the law that they would have known really well. Okay, verse 26. When a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, when a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, and destroys it, he shall let the slave go free because of his eye. If he knocks out the tooth of his slave, male or female, there it is again, he shall let the slave go free because of his tooth. Okay? Now, we talked last week about our misconceptions that we bring to that and what's really going on. And here's one more way that the Lord is making provision for them because the master of the slave was what? To care for them, to compensate them, to take care for them, to treat them like their own family. So if he strikes him, or if even one of his teeth falls out, he has to let him go. Now, if they live in community, which they do, if I see one of Bill's slaves going free, what do I know? Bill is not taking care of his people, right? So there's a community accountability here that is being built into the law that I know if he is not taking care of the people in his house, right, then they're going free and everybody can see it. And so then we can go to Bill and say, hey, you're not treating your people right? And we can go back to the laws about slaves and how they're supposed to be treated, right? And so that was just an extra little thing to kind of tack on from what we talked about last week. Okay, verse 28. When an ox gores a man or woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall not be liable. But if the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has been warned, but has not kept it in, and it kills a man or woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall be put to death. Okay, if a ransom is imposed on him, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is imposed on him. If it gores a man's son or daughter, he shall be dealt with according to the same rule. If the ox gores a slave, male or female, the owner shall give to the master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. Okay, so there is laws about oxen, right? And this is the part where if you're reading through there, you're like, I don't have oxen. And, just God made oxen. Is that good? Like, can that be our takeaway? And I think yes and no. I think what we see here is that outlines these laws about oxen and the appropriate assignment of justice. And it's showing the difference in a deliberate thing, a negligent thing, right? If people have told you this ox is out of hand and you're not handling it, that's negligence, right? And we're not going to be that way as the people of God. And so he kind of outlines deliberate, negligent, and accidental. So that can kind of be, this is how specific the Lord is getting with them. And then you enter into 21 verses 33 through 22:15. And this whole section is about property law. And at this time, the most common property people had, anybody want to guess? Yeah, it was animals, right? It was animals mostly. And so a lot of the laws that we see in this section have to do with thieves, and when something is taken, repaying it by giving more than you took. And then we see a verse about self-defense at night. If you read with me in chapter 22, verses 2 through 3, it says, if a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. But if the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. And he shall He shall surely pay. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. If the stolen beast is found alive in his possession, whether it's an ox or donkey or sheep, he shall pay double. So what is this ultimately saying? It's talking about self-defense at night versus in the daytime, right? Somebody breaks in, what happens at night versus what happens in the day, okay? And so reading through there, you'll see the Lord just making all kinds of provision for his people in all different situations. He's not leaving a lot out, right? And kind of working all the specificity there. And then you get to 22, verses 7 through 15. And this section applies to damage or theft to property owned by a person. This section also outlines what happens when something has been loaned to someone else and gets lost or stolen. And this also covers the law for those who lie about being a victim of theft, right? So I had something, it was stolen when it really wasn't. So God, again, has a thorough set for them of how they will look different as the people of Yahweh. So we may be weary readers at this point, right? Asking ourselves, why are we still reading this? Why do we care so much about property and what they do, and whether the sun is up or the sun is down, or the ox he'd been told before, or it was his first time? Why do we care so much about this? And I think that's a great question, but I think a couple things let's remember. One is these people have been enslaved in Egypt, and they have owned very little, if anything. So just like if you have children in the room, I remember so we had a 1-year-old when our second child was born. And so he doesn't ever remember her not being around. But when she was a little bit bigger than that, he was like 1.5, and she sneezed. And he said, "You're supposed to say, 'bless you.'" Oh my word, she doesn't even know what a sneeze is, right? And he was so overwhelmed all of a sudden at all we had to teach her, right? She doesn't even know to say, "bless you." She doesn't even know what a sneeze is. And he was so overwhelmed. And we were like, we feel the same way, bud, right? There's so much to teach them. And in the same way, I think that God is being patient towards them in their lack of understanding. And all they know is how not to do it. Because they've been in Egypt where they were mistreated. That's not how we're going to treat people, right? Where things were taken from them. We're not going to take from people. Where all manner of things were happening to them, and that's all they know. So he is going to make sure that they understand, and it's crucial for them to understand what is acceptable as the people of God in regards to how to treat others and their property. Okay, so then the next section are laws about social justice and our responsibility to the community in regards to one another. So look with me in verse 16 through 17. If a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall give the bride price for her and make her his wife. I'm in Exodus 22, verse 16. If her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the bride price for the virgins. Okay, these are the kind of things. These are the kind of things that we start thinking, oh, see, now I was with you. You walked me through the slave thing. I felt better. This, I will not be moved, right? And okay, I can take that. And so that's why I want to stop there, right? Because I don't think you're going to fight me about oxen and gore, okay? But right here, it's like, wait a second, this brushes up against what I know to be good about the Lord. Why didn't he just say, just treat the women like queens, you people, right? And here's what I think we can take away from that. What is happening here, okay? In a culture where you were not marriageable, if something like this happened to you, even if you were the victim, okay? This protects you and gives you a way to be safe. It also provides the father, right, if he deems it unsafe, if he deems it unsafe for her to be with this man, then he can intervene and restitution can be made. Okay? And this is hard for us to understand because this is not the culture we live in, especially in America. Okay? So this culture does exist in certain parts of the world, but not where we are. And so this idea that the paying the money, right? It's not like this, we have this visual of this girl that doesn't, all this is going on. What that means is her dowry, right? He doesn't have anything. This price is not just like, how much is she worth, right? It was this cultural context of dowry and of all that would play into what you're reading there. And then verse 18 through 30, which we won't take the time to read, but this deals about laws with sojourners, widows, the fatherless. And here's one thing we can pull out from verse 31 that I think really, there's kind of two verses in that section that, actually one's not quite in that section, but that I would want to pull out. Number one is 22:31. So he says all of this, like, you shall not revile God, you shall not delay in offering fullness of the harvest, you shall not wrong a sojourner, you shall not oppress them, you shall not mistreat them. If you lend money to any people who are poor, you shall not act like a moneylender and charge them interest, right? There's all these kind of things laid out. And when we're weary of reading those laws, right, which is one reason I didn't actually go through and read them because I'm trusting that you will, is then we get to verse 31 and it says what? You shall be consecrated to me. As a summary statement, he's saying, you shall be consecrated to me. Meaning you have been declared sacred. You represent me. And we see this in other parts of Scripture, this very same idea, except it's spelled out like this. Be holy as I am holy. And you want to hear like the chief moment of the matter is that you are consecrated to him. You are ruined from the ordinary. You do not get to act however you want to. You are the people of God. And the same can be true for you and I. And no, we're not over here figuring out laws about oxen and who stoned and who didn't and all this kind of stuff. But what are we? We are consecrated people. We are set apart for a particular use or purpose. Let me show you some other places in Scripture that this speaks to. Leviticus 19:2. Speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Leviticus 27. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I am the Lord your God. Leviticus 20:26. You shall be holy to me, for I am the Lord and I am holy and have separated you from the people that you should be mine. Leviticus 21:8. You shall sanctify him, for he offers the bread of your God. He shall be holy to you, for I, the Lord, who sanctify you, am holy. Exodus 19:6. This is where we've been. And you will be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel. And for you New Testament lovers, 1 Peter 1:15 and 16. But as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all of your conduct, since it is written, you shall be holy as I am holy. In 1 Thessalonians 4:7.